Hello everyone, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Stories about life in the Soviet Union. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи! Вы смотрите программу Ushanka Show. Thank you for joining me for another episode of my book review Black on Red by Robert Robertson, American engineer who spent 44 years inside Soviet Union. Today's video is number 19, and if you're new to my channel, I will post the link below in the comment section to the playlist dedicated to this book. Black on Red by Robert Robertson. But before we begin, I would like to reply to a comment that was posted on my previous video on this book. Sometimes I feel sympathy for Robert, and sometimes I feel like this is what you get for believing the USSR would be a better place to live. Okay, so my understanding, Robert never believed that Soviet Union was a better place to live, but he definitely believed the Soviet Union at that time was a better place to work. If you remember the beginning of his story, Robert Robertson in 1930-1931 worked at Ford's factory in Detroit as a toolmaker. He had a degree in engineering from Havana, Cuba, but back in those days, it was impossible for African American to get an engineering job at the factories in the United States. So the Soviets offered him an amazing opportunity to work as an engineer for double the pay. So it was impossible to say no in his position. He would get his dream job and he will get paid way more he was getting in Detroit. So coming to the Soviet Russia was a smart move on his part, money-wise and career-wise. I think Robinson's biggest mistake was letting the Soviets get him sucked into this propaganda wars where he was reading speeches about how great it is to be in the Soviet Union and work here without facing racism, which pissed off American government, which brought the ultimatum, or you're coming back to the United States or we're going to revoke your U.S. citizenship. And then he made the second biggest mistake. He decided to accept Soviet citizenship, and that's how he got stuck for 44 years in the USSR. And while we're on the topic of people that believe that the USSR would be a better place to live, I just learned a pretty good joke on this topic. So this joke is about two American workers that learned that life is way better in the Soviet Union in the 1930s. So one was super excited, another one was skeptical. So they decided, okay, let's do this. You go to the Soviet Union since you're so excited, work there, explore, and then let me know. Write me a letter about the conditions. And just in case there is a censorship and you can write bad things or warn me about bad conditions in the Soviet Union, just use green ink. So you can write whatever you want, but if the letter is written in green ink, there'll be a sign that's not a good thing to be in the Soviet Union. So one guy left, and about 6 months later, another guy who's still in America received the letter, and he opens the envelope and he's like, oh, thank God, because the letter is written in normal black ink. So he started reading the letter, and it says everything great. There's plenty of food, there's plenty of work, plenty of entertainment. Everything is great, except there is just a little small things here and there, nothing major. For example, it's impossible to find green ink in the stores, so I had to write you with black ink. Well, I hope you found this joke funny. I know I have a horrible skills in delivering the jokes, but I tried. And now let's go back to the book Black on Red, and we have part 3, The Khrushchev Era, chapter 24, A Space Era Begins. I'm actually excited about this chapter because we're going to talk about Sputnik, about space exploration. Let's talk about space, baby. Let's talk about you and me. And looking back, I think the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States was actually a good thing, way better than the arms race. I think I read somewhere once that the United States originally was planning to send a satellite size of the orange into the space by 1980, but competition with the Soviet Union sped up the space technology development so much that in the late 50s, early 60s, we had satellites in space and then humans in space. Okay, so let's see what Robert Robertson was talking about space era beginning. The crushing of the 1956 Hungarian revolt put the Russian workers into deep depression. He doesn't specify why. He just states the fact that they got depressed due to the crushing of Hungarian revolt. And then this depression, which was finally lifted by the electrifying news on October 4, 1957. I heard the first announcement over the radio while I was at work. Attention, attention, this is Radio Moscow, broadcasting all over the Soviet Union. TASS, which is a telegraph agency of the Soviet Union, is authorized to inform the Soviet people that the USSR has placed an artificial satellite in space, and it is orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes. So we're talking about first Sputnik. All the workers stopped what they were doing and began talking about the announcement. As they began to understand the meaning of what their nation's space scientists had done, workers began to clap, slap each other on the back, cheer, and even dance. Many people stole glances at me to see how an American would react to the news that the Soviet Union had catapulted ahead of the United States. Sergei, a Komsomol member, climbed onto a workbench and asked for silence. "Comrades," he said, "I know one thing. America, with all its supposedly superior science and technology, was not able to accomplish what we have done today. Who can deny such a thing?" Before the workers could cheer, the telephone rang with the message from the factory director that everyone was to report to the conference hall for a celebration. People in the conference hall were exultant. The factory hierarchy, director, district party secretary, shops party secretary, and all the people were standing on the platform in the front. At the side of the platform, a group of workers was holding a large, hastily made banner that proclaimed the USSR as the world's leader in science. Party members in the crowd were holding placards with slogans such as, "There is no question about the superiority of socialism over capitalism. Soviet people, be proud of your progress and achievements," and "Hurrah for our motherland." One of the model workers, or the workers that did an excellent job, advanced to the rostrum and read a prepared speech into the microphone. "Comrades," she said, "as of today we are no longer competing with. We are ahead of the USA. Why is this? It is because of our system, because we are better organized. Now that we are ahead, this is no time to relax. I therefore challenge all our Komsomol workers to a socialist competition. We must increase our productivity, eliminate spoiled products by 20%. She's talking about brak. And our output must be excellent. Everyone applaud. Okay, so let's pause right here and try to analyze what is going on in the Soviet Union. So we are witnessing the beginning of Nikita Khrushchev era, when he offered Soviet people pride as something that would inspire them to make them work harder and better. So this is a totally new approach because Comrade Stalin used fear as a tool to make Soviet people work hard. If you don't work hard, you can get arrested, you can get sent to labor camp, or even get shot. Now, Nikita Khrushchev is offering something different. The Khrushchev years were marked with the slogan "Догнать и перегнать Америку," to catch up and overcome America, economically, technologically, militarily. And before we return to the book, I would like to point out something else. It's really amazing, not in a good way, that just like 15 years prior, during the World War II, Soviet Union and United States were friends and allies fighting the common enemy, Nazi Germany, and now they're the biggest competitors. That literally, they hate each other. Okay, so let's see what else Robert Robertson says. After work, out on the streets, on the tram, and in the housing complexes, people were speaking about only one thing: Sputnik 1. When I arrived at work the next morning, my shop was transformed. The factory's slogan artist had worked through the night. Wherever I turned, I found the slogan glaring at me, proclaiming the Soviet victory in space. I could only imagine how many millions of yards of clothes, gallons of paint and paint remover, and thousands of miles of cord are manufactured in the USSR in order to sustain similar propaganda efforts in factories throughout the country. The next morning at work, Sergei, the Komsomol member in my department, walked past and said, "Beep, beep," as if he was speaking to no one in particular. I must have heard that from him 20 more times during the day. So he was making the Sputnik sound, kind of like teasing this poor American. So as you see, the whole country got that Sputnik fever. And he writes again, "On my way home, Sputnik mania trapped me in the subway as two drunks at the other end of the train bellowed our songs praising their motherland. Two other Russians staggered into the train and sat down on either side of me. I felt trapped. One of them leaned over, looked me right in the eye, and asked if I spoke Russian. I shook my head no. He started talking to me anyway. First came the obvious question. What do you think of the Soviet Union great Sputnik achievement? I played dumb. They both kept talking to me simultaneously until one of them gave up and slumped over in his seat. The other one took this moment to proclaim loudly to his captive audience of passengers, "We, the people of the Soviet Union, have overtaken the United States in science and technology. From now on, we are going to lead the world, and the US will be second best." For the entire next month, the radio and the newspapers were filled with the news of Sputnik 1, promises of greater accomplishments in the future, and the assurances that the United States would never catch up. Special meetings were called at the factory to hear Kremlin propagandists talk about the Soviet Union's superior technology and its pursuit of peaceful scientific endeavors. And Robert continues, "As one who was looked upon as a foreigner, I was additionally hounded by little beep beeps whenever I went in Moscow. The beep beeps were clearly part of the cute little campaign conceived by some Kremlin leader or propaganda committee to remind foreigners of the Soviet Union's preeminence in the field of science." So this part of Robert's book reminded me of the movie Hidden Figures about NASA working feverishly, competing with the Soviets to send the first man in space. Of course, that happened a little bit later, but it's definitely, there's a lot of interesting comparison between what was going on in the United States and what was going on in the Soviet Union. As I said, I think it was a good competition. New technologies were developed, so that was great competition. Okay, so we'll be wrapping up part 19 of my review of the book Black on Red by Robert Robinson. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.